After 10 years of raising her, loving her, and calling her my daughter. My wife looked me in the eye and said, "You'll never be her real dad." I didn't say a word. I just walked away. I remember the day like it was etched into the walls of my mind. The sunlight had that sharp, almost cruel quality, cutting through the blinds of the kitchen where I had spent countless mornings sipping coffee, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator, and watching my daughter, Lily, scurry around with the careless joy of childhood. 10 years. 10 whole years of being a father in every sense that mattered. I'd held her when she cried, wiped her scraped knees, and stayed awake when nightmares clawed at her tiny chest. I knew every freckle on her face, every stray curl that fell over her forehead, every inflection in her voice that signaled she needed me. And yet, in a single moment, standing there with my wife's words hanging like a guillotine, all of that felt fragile, meaningless. Like what you see? Hit like, spread the love by sharing, and subscribe so you never miss an update. She looked at me with that cold, unyielding gaze. Her voice, calm but cutting, carried the weight of betrayal. You'll never be her real dad. I wanted to argue, to plead, to make her understand that fatherhood wasn't about biology, it was about years of unwavering love. But the words died in my throat. I couldn't force them out without shattering into something I wasn't ready to confront. I turned, feeling the weight of the house pressing against my chest, and walked away, the echo of her statement following me like a ghost I couldn't shake. The day outside mirrored my inner storm. Rain had begun to fall in hesitant drops, tapping against the car windshield as if the sky itself were mourning. I drove aimlessly, not caring about destination or direction, letting the rhythm of the rain punctuate the silence that had settled in my chest. Each red light seemed like a judgment, each passing stranger a reminder of how ordinary life went on, indifferent to my private collapse. I found myself at the edge of the old pier, a place I hadn't visited since I was Lily's age. The boards creaked underfoot, wet and slick, the wind tangling my hair and biting at my cheeks. I stared at the water below, gray and restless, reflecting the chaos inside me. Memories of the day she came into my life flooded back, how tiny she had been, how her laugh had stolen my heart before I even knew what love truly was. I traced every scar, every scraped knee, every sleepless night, and for a fleeting moment the world felt small, manageable. And then the weight returned, the relentless, crushing reminder that biology had rendered my efforts invisible in her mother's eyes. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove through empty streets, neon lights reflecting in puddles, my mind a swirl of images and emotions. I remembered the first time I met her mother, Sarah. She had been everything I wasn't, poised, confident, seemingly untouchable. And yet, there was a vulnerability there that had drawn me in. We had fallen into an easy rhythm, two people navigating life's uncertainties together. And then Lily came into our world like a comet, bright and unexpected, demanding everything we had. I had embraced that chaos, and in the quiet, unspoken moments, I had built a life that felt real, tangible, anchored by love. But real. That word, it clawed at me, a constant refrain that undermined every memory, every effort, every ounce of devotion I had poured into raising her. Real, as if fatherhood could be measured in blood rather than in the years of presence, in the nights of comfort, in the shared smiles and tears. I could almost hear Lily's laughter, but it was fractured now, a haunting echo rather than a balm. And I realized then that life had a way of twisting joy into something bitter, of making the ones you love the instruments of your deepest pain. I parked near an abandoned warehouse, the paint peeling, windows fogged and cracked. It smelled of damp wood and rust, the kind of smell that seeps into your clothes and your hair and doesn't wash away. I leaned against the metal railing, arms crossed, staring into the shadows as if they could offer answers. I remembered how I had built forts with her in this very neighborhood, how her tiny hands had clutched mine with unshakable trust. And yet that trust had a limit, an invisible line drawn by someone who refused to see beyond genetics. Hours passed. The rain turned into a steady downpour, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind drifted into questions that had no answers. Had I ever really been enough? Could love alone ever override the weight of blood? Was everything I had fought for, every sacrifice, meaningless because someone else dictated what real meant? Then my phone buzzed. I hadn't checked it in hours. A message from Lily appeared, simple and innocent, the words cutting through the storm in a way I hadn't expected. "Daddy, come home soon, I miss you." My chest tightened. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. She just knew the warmth of a hand that had held her since the day she was born, and suddenly I felt both an unbearable pull and a crushing hopelessness. Could I return? Could I face the words that had poisoned the air in my own home? I walked back to my car, drenched, shivering, but with a clarity that only despair can bring. I had loved her as my own for a decade. That couldn't be erased. But maybe, just maybe, I had to step into a world where my love wasn't enough to find out if she would ever see me as something more than a placeholder. The road ahead was uncertain, and the night stretched long and heavy, but I had one thing, an unshakable resolve to protect the bond we had built, no matter how fragile or contested it might be. Little did I know, that night was only the beginning. The revelation that I wasn't considered real would unravel not just my sense of self, but the very fabric of our family, setting in motion a series of events that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal. The morning after, the house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes every small noise, a dripping faucet, the creak of a floorboard, feel amplified. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the wall opposite, tracing cracks in the paint, as if I could map the fractures in my own life. Lily was probably asleep upstairs, unaware of the tension that had poisoned the night air. Sarah, on the other hand, had already left for work, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, in a rhythm that had once felt comforting, but now felt like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something. I couldn't stop. I got up, the weight of my own body heavy on me, and wandered into the kitchen. The morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, cutting across the counters in harsh, uneven lines. The coffee pot steamed silently, the smell of roasted beans failing to bring comfort. I poured myself a cup and sat at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, feeling the heat seep into my palms. I tried to imagine the conversations that would unfold today. Would I confront Sarah? Would I leave? Or would I sink further into the quiet despair that had wrapped itself around me like a second skin? The sound of tiny footsteps on the staircase pulled me from my thoughts. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, her hair a mess from sleep, eyes wide and curious. She clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest, the one she had insisted on bringing everywhere. She looked at me, and for a moment the world narrowed. Nothing else existed outside that gaze, the innocent trust of a child who believed in you unconditionally. "Daddy?" she said softly, her voice a mixture of hope and fear. "Are you mad at me?" My chest tightened. How could I explain that I wasn't mad at her, that I was struggling to reconcile words that had no place in a child's world? I forced a smile, though it felt like a mask I was wearing for the first time. "Never, Lily," I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best effort to steady it. "I could never be mad at you." She smiled faintly, as if relieved, and padded over to me. I pulled her into a hug, feeling the softness of her small frame, the familiar warmth that had anchored me for 10 years. And yet, even as I held her, I could feel the distance growing. Not in her, but in the space between her and the woman I had married. It was like trying to grasp water with your hands. No matter how hard you held on, it slipped through. The day dragged on in a haze of tension. Sarah returned home mid-morning, her presence filling the house in a way that felt both natural and suffocating. She didn't speak immediately, just moved through the kitchen, placing her purse down and rifling through the mail. I watched her from the living room, the words she had spoken yesterday echoing in my head with relentless clarity. I knew she expected me to react, to argue, to crumble, but I stayed silent. Words, I realized, were inadequate for the depth of betrayal I felt. "Are you coming to lunch?" she asked finally, her tone neutral, almost casual. I looked up from my hands, meeting her eyes, and said nothing. The refusal hung between us, more damning than any argument could have been. She raised an eyebrow, a small, calculating gesture that had always unnerved me. She turned and walked upstairs, presumably to get ready, leaving me in the quiet aftermath of our unspoken conflict. I couldn't stay. Not like this. I grabbed my coat and headed out, the rain starting again in fine, misty drops that clung to my hair and clothes. I drove without direction, the city blurring past in streaks of neon and streetlights. My mind drifted to the earliest days with Lily, back when she was a tiny bundle of life and uncertainty. I remembered the nights I spent rocking her to sleep, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep, and how those promises had transformed into years of unwavering devotion. And now, those memories felt like fragile threads, threatening to snap under the weight of Sarah's rejection. I ended up in the old part of the city, where abandoned buildings leaned precariously and graffiti told stories of people who had been forgotten. The alleyways smelled of damp stone and rust, the air thick with a sense of history and neglect. I leaned against a brick wall, closing my eyes and letting the rain soak through my jacket. I could hear voices in the distance, muffled laughter and the clatter of footsteps, but none of it reached me. I was isolated in my own mind, circling the same questions. Was I enough? Had all the nights of sacrifice meant nothing? Could a child's love survive when the mother refused to acknowledge it? Hours passed in a haze, and I found myself walking through a narrow park, the trees heavy with wet leaves, the path slippery underfoot. I stumbled upon a small hidden playground, the swings swaying gently in the wind, creaking in a rhythm that felt almost mournful. I sat on the edge of the sandbox, the cold sand clinging to my jeans, and watched the swings move as if pushed by invisible hands. I remembered pushing Lily on these very swings, the sound of her laughter piercing the quiet, the wind catching her hair and turning it into a halo of sunlight. And then I realized something. The love I had given her didn't require validation. It was real, tangible, enduring, even if the world refused to see it. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Lily. "Can we go to the park later? Just you and me?" My heart clenched. She wanted the bond we had nurtured, untouched by adult conflicts. I wanted to answer immediately, but I couldn't. Instead, I stared at the message, feeling a mix of hope and despair. Maybe she understood things in a way Sarah didn't. Maybe her love was untainted by the judgments that had fractured our family. But the question lingered. Could I fight for that bond against the very person who had built walls around us? Returning home later, I found the atmosphere tense. Sarah had prepared dinner, but there was an unspoken barrier, a distance that no conversation could bridge. Lily ran to me the moment I stepped through the door, her small arms wrapping around my legs. I picked her up, holding her close, feeling the pulse of life that was mine to protect, mine to cherish, and in that embrace, I realized that the fight was no longer about proving anything to Sarah. It was about preserving the love that had always been, the bond that had survived years of challenges and hardship. But as the night unfolded, subtle cracks began to appear in the facade of calm. Sarah's eyes darted toward us, a mixture of frustration and calculation, and I realized that this was only the beginning. The words she had spoken were not just a rejection. They were a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down in the quiet of our home, and I knew, deep down, that this was going to escalate. The sanctuary I had built for Lily and myself was under siege, and I would have to navigate a labyrinth of deception, manipulation, and hidden truths to protect what mattered most. Late that night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I sat in her room, tracing her small hand on the quilt. Her breathing was steady, innocent, unknowing of the turmoil surrounding her. I whispered to the shadows, to the room, to the years of love we had shared, promising that I would fight, no matter what obstacles Sarah put in my path. And in that quiet determination, a seed of resolve took root, a plan forming to confront the realities of our fractured family, to uncover hidden truths, and to redefine what it truly meant to be a father. As I left her room and closed the door softly, I could feel the tension building, like a storm gathering on the horizon. The days ahead would be uncertain, dangerous even, filled with twists I couldn't yet anticipate. But one thing was clear. I would not let the bond I had nurtured for a decade be undermined. Not by words, not by biology, not by anyone. And somewhere, deep inside, a voice whispered that the truth was far more complicated than either of us realized, and that the revelations to come would change everything forever. The next morning, the sun had a pale, hesitant glow, filtering weakly through the bedroom blinds. I woke before anyone else, the house silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant chirping of birds outside. My mind refused to rest, turning over possibilities, scenarios, and questions I didn't yet have answers to. Each thought seemed heavier than the last, pressing into my chest until I felt as if I might collapse under the weight of uncertainty. I walked quietly into the kitchen, my footsteps muffled by the worn carpet, and poured myself a cup of coffee. The steam swirled upward in thin ribbons, and I watched it for a moment, lost in its ephemeral beauty. In that quiet, I realized how much of my life had been spent holding together the delicate threads of our family, threads now fraying at the edges, threatened by a single declaration that I would never be Lily's real father. The sound of the front door opening jolted me. Sarah had returned from an early meeting. She moved through the house with practiced efficiency, a calm that felt unnatural, almost rehearsed. She glanced at me briefly, then at Lily, who was now awake and rubbing her eyes. There was a tension in the air, a palpable distance I couldn't bridge with words. "Daddy, can you help me with my project?" Lily asked, holding up a small box covered in colored paper and glitter. Her eyes were wide, innocent, filled with trust. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd managed since Sarah's words had cut through me. "Of course," I said, kneeling beside her. As we worked together, cutting and gluing and laughing softly, I felt the familiar rhythm return. This was our world, our bubble, and no one could intrude here. Not yet. But even as I smiled, I knew the calm was temporary. Something was building beneath the surface, a storm I couldn't yet see. By mid-morning, Sarah had left again, and I was alone with Lily. We ventured outside, the air crisp and tinged with the smell of wet leaves. The park was quiet, only a few other children scattered across the playground, their laughter muffled by the distance. I pushed Lily on the swings, watching her tiny feet kick into the sky, the wind tangling her hair. Her laughter was pure, untarnished, and for a moment I allowed myself to forget the world outside this moment. But as we walked home, hand in hand, I noticed a strange tension in the neighborhood. Cars parked outside houses we didn't recognize. People watching from windows. There was a feeling, subtle yet insistent, that someone was observing us, tracking our movements. I dismissed it at first, convincing myself it was paranoia, the residue of the previous day's emotional storm. But the feeling persisted, a gnawing unease that clung to my thoughts like a shadow. That evening, a letter arrived. No return address, the handwriting unfamiliar. I opened it with hesitant fingers, unfolding the paper to reveal a single line that sent a chill down my spine. "You don't know the truth about Lily's past. Meet me at the pier tonight." Alone. My heart raced. Questions erupted in my mind. Who would send this? What truth could they possibly be referring to? My first instinct was fear. Fear for Lily, fear for myself. But beneath that, a flicker of curiosity. Could this be a chance to uncover something that had been hidden from me all along? I tucked the letter into my pocket, trying to appear calm when Lily asked about it. "Daddy, what is it?" she asked, sensing my tension. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Just grown-up things." Her small hand found mine, squeezing gently, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. Whatever this was, I would face it, but not at the cost of her safety. As night fell, the house was still. I waited until Sarah was asleep before slipping out, the letter burning a hole in my pocket. The pier was deserted, the rain having washed away most signs of human presence. The boards creaked beneath my feet, the wind whipping across the water in sharp, cold gusts. A single figure waited at the far end, silhouetted against the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. "You came," the figure said, voice low and unfamiliar. "I wasn't sure you would." "Who are you?" I asked, stepping closer, my eyes straining to see. "They call me someone who knows the truth," the figure replied. "The truth about Lily, about her life before she came to you." A chill ran through me. I had always known there were pieces of Lily's early life that Sarah had never shared. Adoption records, medical histories, all locked away in files I had never been allowed to see. My stomach twisted as the figure handed me a small envelope. Inside were documents, photographs, and letters, each one more shocking than the last. Lily had a biological father, someone Sarah had never mentioned. Worse, there were hints that she had been kept away from him for reasons I couldn't yet comprehend. Images of a man holding a child who looked strikingly like Lily flashed across my mind. Questions spiraled out of control. Why had Sarah hidden this? Who was this man? And most importantly, how did this information change my place in Lily's life? I felt a mixture of rage, fear, and determination. Rage at the betrayal, fear for Lily's safety and emotional well-being, and determination to navigate the maze of secrets that had been built around her. The figure turned to leave, melting into the shadows, leaving me alone with the documents and a storm of conflicting emotions. Returning home, I sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the papers. The rain outside mirrored the turmoil inside me, each drop a reminder that the world had shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. I knew I had to confront Sarah, but I also knew the confrontation would be explosive. Her carefully constructed facade of control was about to crumble, and there was no going back. When she finally emerged, dressed for the morning, I had the documents ready. The kitchen seemed smaller, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, "we need to talk. About Lily. About everything you've been keeping from me." Her eyes flickered, a brief crack in the armor of composure. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her tone lacked conviction. I laid the documents on the table, forcing her to meet my gaze. "Don't lie to me. I know about her biological father, about the adoption records, everything." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "You weren't supposed to find out this way. I wanted to protect her, protect us. But you don't understand. You'll never understand." The words stung, but beneath the fury, I sensed something else. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of the consequences of a decade of secrets unraveling. And in that moment, I realized that the battle for Lily's life and her understanding of love was only just beginning. Over the next days, a delicate, dangerous game unfolded. I delved deeper into the documents, piecing together Lily's early history, speaking to distant relatives, uncovering hidden medical reports and letters that hinted at a complicated web of manipulation. Each discovery added layers of complexity and suspense, revealing that the story Sarah had told was only one side of a far more intricate truth. I felt like I was navigating a labyrinth with no clear exit, each turn revealing more questions than answers. But through it all, Lily remained the center of my world. Every photograph, every letter, every secret I uncovered only strengthened my resolve. I would protect her, love her, fight for her, no matter how many obstacles Sarah or the world placed in my path. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, I felt that the final revelation, the one that would shatter everything, was waiting. It was coming, inevitable, and when it arrived, nothing in our lives would ever be the same. The days that followed the discovery of the documents were a blur of sleepless nights, endless questions, and the quiet hum of a house that had become a battlefield. Lily remained blissfully unaware of the tension that crackled in the air like static, and I found myself torn between preserving her innocence and preparing for the confrontation that was inevitable. Every glance at her reminded me of the stakes. She was my daughter in every way that mattered, and yet the world was conspiring to complicate that simple truth. Sarah's behavior shifted subtly at first, small signs of anxiety and unease. The confident woman I had married seemed fragile, her carefully constructed armor cracking under the pressure of truths she could no longer contain. I noticed the way her hands trembled slightly when she carried a cup of coffee, and how her eyes darted toward me when she thought I wasn't looking. It was a stark contrast to the cold, detached demeanor she had displayed the day she told me I would never be Lily's real father. I decided it was time to confront her properly, to force the truth into the open. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, I called her into the living room. The room felt smaller than usual, the shadows from the lamp stretching across the walls like fingers trying to reach into every corner of my mind. "We need to talk," I began, my voice calm, but carrying the weight of resolve. "About everything. About Lily, about your secrets, about the things you've hidden for 10 years. Sarah's face hardened, her jaw tightening. "I've told you everything you need to know," she said, but there was a tremor in her voice that betrayed her. "You'll never understand why I did what I did." I took a deep breath. "Try me. I want to understand. But first, no more lies, no more hiding things from me or from her." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally, she sat down, her shoulders slumping, as if the fight had drained from her body. "It's not simple," she whispered. "You think love is enough. You think being there for her makes you her father. But there are things you don't know, things that could destroy everything." I leaned forward. "Then tell me, Whatever it is, I can handle it. Lily deserves the truth, and so do I." She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and began to speak. The story that unfolded was more complex, more twisted than I could have imagined. Lily's biological father wasn't just a man from her past. He had been involved in dangerous situations, people Sarah had wanted to shield Lily from at all costs. She revealed secrets of manipulation, threats, and betrayals that had been buried beneath layers of careful planning. And then, the final bombshell. She admitted she had lied about certain events, painted me as an outsider in an attempt to control the narrative, to maintain her own sense of power. The words hit me like a physical blow. Rage, disbelief, sorrow, they all collided in my chest, threatening to shatter my composure. And yet, beneath it all, a fierce, protective instinct surged. I had to safeguard Lily, no matter the cost. The next morning, I woke with a clarity that was almost frightening. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let Sarah's manipulations dictate the course of our lives. I had to uncover the full truth, not just from her, but from every hidden corner of Lily's past. I began to dig, reaching out to distant contacts, old acquaintances of Sarah, and even people who had known her biological father. Each revelation added layers to the mystery, painting a picture far more complex than anything I had imagined. One evening, a call came from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, but carried a weight that immediately demanded my attention. "I know what you're looking for," the voice said, "and I know the truth about Lily's past. Meet me at the old warehouse tonight, alone." The adrenaline surged through me. Another piece of the puzzle, another opportunity to understand what had been hidden. I told no one, not Lily, not Sarah. The warehouse was dark, the air thick with the scent of rust and damp wood. Shadows clung to the corners, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the vast, empty space. "You came," the figure said, emerging from the darkness. It was a man, his features partially obscured by the low light. "I've been waiting for someone who would fight for her." "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. "Someone who knows the truth," he replied, "and the truth is more dangerous than you can imagine. Lily's life has been in danger before, and it's not over. Sarah did what she thought was best, but she lied. The people involved will stop at nothing. You need to be ready." The words sent a chill down my spine. Threats, secrets, lies. I had stepped into a world I hadn't anticipated, a world where love alone was not enough to protect the child I had raised for 10 years. The man handed me a folder, thick with photographs, documents, and coded letters. Each page revealed a network of people, situations, and histories I had never dreamed of, each one connecting back to Lily in ways that made my head spin. Returning home, I felt a new determination solidify within me. The past 10 years of love, care, and devotion had given me a claim far stronger than any bloodline. I would fight for Lily, uncover every hidden truth, and ensure her safety, no matter the personal cost. And I realized something profound. Being her father wasn't about biology. It was about every sleepless night, every scraped knee, every word of comfort whispered in the dark. It was about being there, unwavering, when the world threatened to tear her away. Over the next week, I orchestrated a careful investigation, like balancing the need for secrecy with the urgency of the threats revealed in the documents. Each day brought new revelations, new puzzles to solve, and new dangers. Sarah, meanwhile, remained on edge, her manipulations growing more desperate as she sensed that I was closing in on truths she had spent a decade concealing. Then came the night of the final revelation. I had traced contacts, verified information, and finally pieced together the truth of Lily's biological father, his connections, and the circumstances that had forced Sarah to make the choices she did. The final confrontation was inevitable. I confronted Sarah in the living room, documents spread out across the table like evidence in a trial. "I know everything," I said, my voice firm. "I know why you lied, why you tried to manipulate the narrative. But I also know that nothing will make me give up on Lily. I am her father in every way that counts." Her face twisted with a mixture of fear, anger, and resignation. She realized the game was over. And then the final twist came. Not from her, but from a hidden document I had discovered at the very last moment. Lily's biological father had been aware of her all along. He had tried to reach her, had been blocked by Sarah's machinations, but had left a series of messages, hidden letters, and protections designed to safeguard her should anything happen to her. He was not the villain I had feared, but a man trying to protect his child from the same chaos that now threatened to engulf us all. The revelation changed everything. The stakes had been higher than I had imagined, but it also cemented my place in Lily's life. I was the father who had raised her, loved her, and fought for her every day. Biology was irrelevant. The bond we had built over 10 years was unbreakable. And as I held Lily in my arms that night, the weight of the past weeks lifting slowly, I realized the depth of what it truly meant to be a father. It wasn't blood. It wasn't permission. It was presence, love, protection, and unwavering commitment. I had been her real dad all along, in ways that no one could ever take away. The morning light seeped through the blinds in thin, hesitant lines, casting a soft glow across the living room where Lily played quietly with her dolls. I watched her, a mixture of awe and relief washing over me. The storm of the past weeks, the lies, the secrets, the revelations, had left scars, but in this moment there was calm, a fragile, precious calm. Sarah entered the room, her expression subdued, almost reflective. The confrontations of the previous nights had left us both changed. The walls we had built around ourselves had crumbled, exposing raw, vulnerable truths. She approached cautiously, as if testing the waters of this new reality. She began, faltering. I didn't mean for any of it to go this far. I thought I was protecting her, protecting us. But I see now that I was wrong. I nodded, listening, the weight of her words heavy, but tempered by the knowledge that the fight for Lily's life and her understanding of love was no longer about proving anything to Sarah. It was about protecting the bond that had grown through 10 years of shared experiences, of sleepless nights, scraped knees, whispered comforts, and quiet victories. Lily needs us to be honest, I said softly, but more than that, she needs to know she is loved, not just by us, but by the truth of her life, the people who care for her, and by the love that has always been here. Sarah nodded, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, we shared a moment of understanding. There were no accusations, no defenses, only the shared commitment to the child who had brought us together and tested us in ways we never could have imagined. Later that day, I decided it was time to address the final piece of the puzzle, the man who had been Lily's biological father, whose presence had loomed silently over our lives. We arranged to meet in a public place, a quiet cafe where conversations could be private, but the environment was safe. I felt a mixture of apprehension and resolve as we approached the table where he waited, calm, collected, and surprisingly familiar in the lines of his face and the eyes that reflected both sorrow and hope. He greeted me with a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the shared responsibility we now carried for Lily's well-being. We spoke cautiously at first, navigating the minefield of emotions, histories, and responsibilities that had brought us to this moment. He revealed his perspective, the challenges he had faced in trying to protect Lily from danger he couldn't fully explain, and the ways in which he had tried to reach her from afar, blocked at every turn by circumstances beyond his control. As we talked, I felt a shift within myself. This man was not a threat. He was another person who loved Lily, who wanted the best for her. But I was her father in every meaningful sense, the one who had raised her, loved her, nurtured her, and stood by her through the storms of her life. The years we had shared, the bond we had built, could not be erased by bloodlines or missed opportunities. Returning home, I held Lily close, her small body pressed against mine as she recounted the day's adventures with a smile that seemed to light up the room. I realized then that no document, no revelation, no hidden history could diminish what we had created together. Fatherhood wasn't a title bestowed by biology. It was forged through presence, care, and unwavering love. That night, as Lily slept peacefully in her room, I reflected on the journey we had undertaken. The words Sarah had spoken, "You'll never be her real dad," had once felt like a knife to the heart. But now, in the quiet aftermath of revelations, confrontations, and reconciliations, I understood the truth. Fatherhood is defined not by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and commitment. I had been her real dad all along. I sat at the edge of her bed, tracing the curve of her tiny hand in the moonlight. "I'll always be here," I whispered, a vow that felt as enduring as the stars outside her window, no matter what. And in that moment, I realized that love, once proven through action and presence, is unshakable, unchangeable, and eternal. It survives betrayal, defies expectations, and transcends the limitations of biology. I had learned that the hard way, through heartbreak and revelation, but the lesson was clear. To be a parent is to be present, to fight, to protect, and to love with a depth that cannot be measured. The storm had passed, leaving behind clarity, understanding, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. And though the shadows of the past lingered, they no longer defined us. We were stronger, united, and ready to face whatever the future held. As I turned off the light and left her room, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been harrowing, the revelations shocking, and the challenges immense. But in the end, love had triumphed, proving that the heart's capacity to nurture, protect, and endure is far greater than any obstacle. Weeks passed, and life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Lily laughed more freely, her eyes brighter, unburdened by the invisible weight of secrets that had once hung over her. Sarah and I found a fragile truce, a mutual understanding born from necessity and the hard-won truths that had emerged. The air in the house was lighter, though the scars of the past remained, a reminder of how far we had come and what we had endured. But the final revelation, the truth that would alter everything, came one rainy evening when I received an unexpected message. It was from an anonymous sender. "She needs to know the full truth. Come to the old pier, midnight." My heart raced, a mixture of dread and determination. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't ignore this. Something told me that what I was about to uncover would change the story I had believed for years. The pier was dark, deserted, the wind carrying the scent of the river and the sharp tang of wet wood. As I approached the end, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Lily's biological father. But something was different. He seemed anxious, almost desperate. His eyes searched mine for understanding. "I couldn't protect her the way I wanted to," he began. "I never stopped trying, but I was blocked, misled, and kept away. There's more you need to know, things even Sarah doesn't fully realize." He handed me a small, locked envelope. Inside were letters, videos, and photographs, evidence that Lily's mother had kept from both of us for years. But what shook me to the core was the truth about why Sarah had acted the way she did. There had been threats, people from her past who posed real danger to Dumas. Lily, threats that had stalked her from infancy. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment of control had been a desperate attempt to protect her, not just from her father's past, but from an unseen network of people who wanted to hurt her. I sat there in disbelief, rain soaking through my coat, as I pieced together the full magnitude of the hidden danger. It wasn't about me, not about jealousy, not about possession. It had been about survival. Sarah's actions, harsh and unforgiving as they seemed, had been born from fear and love. And in that moment, I realized the final, most painful truth. Fatherhood is not just love. It is courage in the face of the unimaginable, a willingness to stand guard when no one else can. Returning home, I embraced Lily as she slept, tears mingling with the raindrops still clinging to my hair. I understood now that my role had always been more than father. It had been protector, guide, and anchor. I had been tested in ways I could never have anticipated, but my love, steadfast and unwavering, had carried us through. The final revelation reshaped everything, but it also affirmed the bonds we had built. Sarah, too, bore her own burdens and regrets, but we now shared a deeper understanding. We were united in the most important task, ensuring Lily knew she was loved beyond measure by those who had chosen to stand by her, fight for her, and keep her safe. As I watched her sleep, I whispered a vow. No threat, no secret, no shadow from the past could ever diminish what we had created. Love had been the constant, and now, fortified by truth and sacrifice, it would endure. Reflecting on this journey, I leave you, the audience, with these questions. What defines true love and parental devotion when the world complicates it with secrets, lies, and dangers? How far would you go to protect someone you love, and what sacrifices would you accept to ensure their safety and happiness? When faced with unimaginable revelations, how do you reconcile the past with the present, and how do you choose to move forward without letting fear or anger dictate your actions? Consider the depth of your connections, the courage it takes to stand for those you love, and the resilience that defines family beyond bloodlines.